You're listening to the Law Lives Project. I'm your host, Anjie Vishayanan. I'm a lawyer that launched a startup focused on changing the legal profession through mentorship. Through this podcast, we will explore the early career steps of real lawyers to help students see that many of us didn't have it all figured out at first. It takes time to find your way in the profession, so we want to shed light on some of the challenges people face in the earliest part of building their careers. Each week, I sit down with members of the legal profession and chat with them about the paths they took to get where they are now, including the times they stumbled, the times they fell, and the times they needed a little help. To encourage candor and vulnerability on this show, the attorney guests will remain nameless, but their stories will be laid bare for your consideration. This episode is sponsored by Velocity LSAT.
You already know your LSAT score is the most important component in law school admissions, but did you know that it can also get you the much-coveted entry into the glamorous, high-flying lifestyle of Mensa membership? This is actually true. Well, Velocity LSAT has you covered. Velocity is the online video course taught by me, Dave Hall, the guy with all the 180s. At Velocity, we guarantee you'll hit the 99th percentile or improve by at least 10 points, or we'll keep working with you until you do. Law Lives listeners, that's alliterative, can get half off your first month's installment or $100 off a year's subscription. Just enter code LAWLIVES, LAWLIVES, all one word, at checkout. Enroll, get more details, and see our contact info at velocitylsat.com.
Today's guest is the founder and CEO of an alternative legal services company. We'll be discussing her career path from law school to working in-house and creating contracts management systems for various companies before finally founding her own contracts management company. We'll also talk about her experiences in starting and running her own company. Let's jump right in. What were the reasons that you chose to go to law school?
I think that I wanted to do something that was challenging. I actually started out thinking that I wouldn't necessarily practice law, and I know that's kind of unusual, but I didn't go to law school thinking I was definitely going to come out and practice, but I really wanted to go to law school for the challenge and to actually complete study, which I'm really glad that I did it because it helped me a lot with a lot of different areas.
What had sparked your interest in it? Did you know any attorneys?
I didn't know a lot of attorneys. I think one of the things that I always tried to do was, I come from kind of a family where there's not a lot of people that have even gone to college. There's very few. And I was always trying to do better and do more, and I had a lot of innate sort of ambition, and sometimes I would do things just to prove that I could do it, as opposed to I have this specific plan.
Okay. What were a few things that you wish you knew before going to law school?
Well, before going to law school, I should have probably looked at the expenses a little bit more. Even undergrad, I spent a lot of money on all my education and probably overspent. I didn't do a good enough job looking at that. And there was some other options, but I was young and ambitious.
And how did you pick which law school to attend?
Well, I picked the law school based on some personal reasons. My sister was actually in San Diego, so I ended up wanting to go to San Diego, and the school that I ended up going to gave me some scholarship in the beginning. But I actually wasn't able to keep the scholarship. It wasn't a full scholarship or anything. It was just, it helped a little bit. So I did pick it for that reason, but it was still very expensive.
Which school did you go to?
California Western School of Law.
And if you could have picked a different law school, would you have? And why?
I might have maybe wanted to go to a more prominent law school. I kind of had my eye on Georgetown at the time. I actually did get accepted to Boston University, but I ended up, again, in San Diego because I got the scholarship, plus my sister was there alone and pregnant with her husband out at sea in the Navy. So I was there for the birth. I was the husband, the stand-in husband.
So was it mostly for proximity with your sister, or did you consider like rankings or
I did consider all that. I didn't make it the biggest priority, to be honest, though.
Did you participate in any extracurricular activities while you were in law school, like moot court or law review, clinics, or externships?
I did a clinic where we helped illegal, I don't even call them illegal immigrants, that came over on a boat from China that had nowhere to go, and I was on the team that helped determine which ones actually had asylum cases versus the ones that didn't, or strong cases versus weaker cases. And the nonprofit organization I work with could only take on so many, so we had to identify which ones we were going to take on. So we interviewed many Chinese, I don't know if you want to call them refugees, because they were escaping, some prosecution in China at the time. So that was one thing I did. And the other thing was I did do like internship for a law office.
Was it a small office, big office?
A small office.
Small office.
Mm-hmm.
And what type of area of law?
It was international law and a lot of law of the sea.
Oh, maritime.
Yeah, maritime law. Mm-hmm.
And did you develop any skills in either of those extracurricular activities that were really valuable for your career?
Absolutely. I think, when you're actually doing things hands-on, it's a lot different than law school. Law school is very theoretical and, analytical, but you don't really work with any people.
So which skills did you pick up?
Definitely, just kind of how to manage cases, legal knowledge that's practical and applicable to what you're doing, which is, different than just reading a case and figuring out what it means or what the issues are.
So did you develop an interest in international law or immigration law?
I did. Originally, I did want to practice international law or do something international because I spent a lot of time in China before I speak Chinese, and I wanted to make that part of my career at the time.
So what jobs and internships did you do during the summer between your 1L and 2L year?
That was the small law office job.
Okay.
That was the law office, if you want to call it, the maritime law office.
Okay. And what jobs or internships did you do between 2L and 3L?
Between 2L and 3L, I didn't do any jobs. I went to Oxford for a summer.
Oh, okay.
And studied international human rights law.
And would you recommend that experience? Did you like the study of
For
law?
me, it was great. It wasn't just about learning. It was about staying in the Oxford University, and it's a historical college, and just being around that English legal system is a huge learning experience. And then I got to work with a very prominent professor who does a lot of international human rights work in the world. So it was really interesting to learn about that.
So how did you apply for your first post-graduation position?
So my first post-graduation position, I had not taken the bar yet, and I was actually not interested in going to a law firm. I mean, I didn't even try to apply because I love the business environment, because you can create your roles is really the reason. So I started looking for some different roles in companies and just apply and see if somebody would hire me. And I was, talking to different people. And so I did get hired by a company that was a manufacturer of tube vending machines. And their biggest customer was China, because China would buy a lot of these machines so that they could manufacture airplanes and stuff, because it's precision tubing that you need to put in airplanes so that all the tubes fit in small spaces, basically. So, and the tubes are metal, and you have to be able to make them rounded or turn, or, so they can fit, or coiled, or I don't know what you want to call it. Anyway, this company was interested in me because I could help them. I was helping the sales person, the VP of sales, I guess he was, for the Asia region. I was helping him with some of the contracts I was reviewing, and I didn't have a lot of experience, but I was still able to, help where I could. And then I was also helping with the Chinese delegations that came to visit to view the plant. There was a lot of delegations coming, and I would give them tours, and I would speak to them in Chinese, and we'd go have dinner, and all that sort of relationship stuff was fun. And I was so glad to be able to do all those things, because that's what I like to do.
So after you went to work for the tubing company, did you stay in that industry?
No, that company was closing down its San Diego office after a year I was there. And I could have moved to Canada. They're based in Canada. And there was some, I don't even remember the name of the city, but some kind of small city in a really cold place in Canada. So I said, no, I'm going to move. I'm going to go find a different job. So I actually, through a temp agency, found I don't know if you want to call it a contracts administration, contracts management sort of position at a small engineering construction firm. And by small, I mean it had about 200 employees. And it was a startup. And the people that started it were from Guyana and Trinidad, like the Caribbean area.
Okay.
And they're very entrepreneurial. But anyway, I started there and I was thinking, I'm just going to do this temporarily until I find what I really want, because this is kind of like really low level and it's just available kind of thing. But when I got in there, I started doing a lot of cool stuff. I organized all their contracts. I started doing things that they had never had done, that they needed to have done, and I became very valuable in a lot of different areas. And I kept pushing this international, do you guys want to do business internationally? I can go research everything, on that. Oh, sure, go research. So I researched everything about Brazil, how to go into Brazil and do business in Brazil, because that was the market they picked. I did do it on China and showed it to them, but they weren't as ready to go to Asia it's just not, but I did do a lot of research actually, just because I wanted to. But I kept doing things that I wanted to and then just presenting it to them. And they kept getting more and more impressed, and I got kind of promoted to the executive team. They wanted me on their executive team, and I was like their in-house counsel, I guess you could call it. They outsourced a lot of their counsel, and so I just sort of ended up managing some of the corporate stuff because I wasn't experienced really enough to do that. But I started getting really good at the contracts part of it and organizing, and even I started creating teams, little teams, but teams of people to do all these different things. And then a large company came in and bought that company, so I went through this acquisition process, and again, I was really valuable in that too. And my team.
How long had you been with the company when that happened?
2 years. So the final year was all this acquisition stuff and all this confusion, all this people getting mad at each other because they're, I don't know, there was payouts and people weren't getting paid. I don't know. There was all this stuff, but I was there and I was helping get things organized and getting the contracts organized and the insurance certificates and all this stuff. And the parent company came to me for a lot of things because I had a lot of information for them. And then after a year of that, they were starting to go through some insecure time. I mean, they were talking about selling it off even after they just bought it 1 year and 1 year later, because big companies apparently just buy, sell, and if they don't like it, they're like, oops, we shouldn't have bought this company, not sell it. I mean, stuff like that happened. So I called one of our customers that I was negotiating a contract with, which was Ericsson, which is here in Plano, Texas. And they said, yeah, we need you over here, because we're doing all this, we're building out our construction business at Ericsson, right, the telecom construction business. And they moved me over like really fast. And I started working on all the contracts with the suppliers for Ericsson, and Ericsson was basically trying to take the market for the construction business and get these other companies to not compete with them. So we went through all the contracts, non-compete and other terms.
So you had been in California prior to this, and then you moved to Texas.
Yeah.
And how long were you with Ericsson?
12 years total.
And can you describe your role at Ericsson?
They hired me as an attorney, but not in the legal department. So the business people hired me as an attorney to work in what they called it was the Partnerships and Alliances group. And it's kind of like a procurement group. I mean, it ended up being more procurement, but at the time it was because they were trying to get into other businesses through other companies. And just by the fact that Ericsson had such a huge footprint and customers, they could take these smaller companies and just put them into their subcontractor group, and then Ericsson would get all the business. So we were involved in all of that. But I grew my team. So for the first 10 years at Ericsson, it started out as me and one other person doing this sort of contracts management role. And it literally grew from us two to 50 people I managed in sourcing.
Wow.
It went from partnerships and alliances to strategic sourcing, and it became this big strategic sourcing thing. And I was just always right there with a role that I wanted, is how I did
That's
it.
Amazing.
So I ended up having 4 functional areas under me in sourcing, which was half of the sourcing department. So it was contracts management, which was a team of attorneys, and we had supplier management, which mostly comprised of non-attorneys, but there were some attorneys, but the attorneys were there to support everybody else anyway, so depending on what people wanted to do. And we had what we called sourcing operations, which was all the IT aspects like timesheets and, from contractors and the systems that we use and improving the systems and the supplier onboarding process through the IT system and all that stuff. And then I had the fleet management group. And so it was just huge. And Ericsson was doing acquisitions and we had tons of contracts. And I just didn't have my teams, but I would hire contractor attorneys too to help with all this stuff. And, the legal department is kind of like, we're too busy doing stuff. We don't have time to get involved in your day-to-day activities, right? So, that role that we played was very valuable to the business because we were attorneys and we could resolve issues really quick. Mm-hmm. And we knew everything was going on with all the suppliers all the time. So
what led you to eventually leave that role?
Well, after the 10 years of great growth, and things always change, right? So I was in the heyday time of everything's going great and business growing, and then it stopped, right? And then the parent company, which is in Sweden, started to take over some of the functions, and it just started, it's not as fun for me to be in an environment where there isn't a lot of growth and room for being creative and finding ways to manage, things that you haven't managed before. I'm not as good at sitting there trying to figure out, let's make the existing system more efficient, or how do we save money by fixing what's existing happening, or, it's not as exciting to me as when you're receiving a bunch of business and figuring out how to manage all that. So, and, it's just, you kind of do things and then you kind of, it's your time to move on. But what I did is I got a position in Ericsson in the business development side. So, which was kind of unusual for someone that's been in sourcing to go into sales, because it's the opposite, basically. I mean, it is the opposite. A lot of people were actually surprised, and I don't have a technical background, and most people at Ericsson all have technical backgrounds because they're selling technical things. But I went over there, and I'm like, well, I'm not technical. You need me because I'm not technical. I mean, you guys don't know how to talk to people. Like, you guys don't know how to explain things in layman's terms. You guys are all too technical. And there's so many, these solutions need to be kind of explained in a way that everybody understands and people that are not technical understand, because there's a lot of people on the customer side that are not technical, all this stuff, right? So I helped with a lot of different things in business development. One of them was growth strategies. One of them was partnerships, because my legal education, of course, came in handy all the time, everything I was doing. And I would say in strategy and in roles like partnerships. And, it's harder to learn law than it is a business. So if you already know the law, that's a skill nobody else is going to have. You can't just all of a sudden be able to, go through 3 years of legal education. Someone can't just fake it, right? You have to actually have done it. So you have that skill that other people don't have. So you're super valuable on a team, like a business development team that's trying to sell something. You can put together a lot of the deal. Mm-hmm. Even though you might have to give it to lawyers too, but you put together most of it and you can tweak it and you can do a lot of stuff and then give it to the lawyer and say, okay, is this okay? And they either say, no, you need to add this or that, but it's kind of already done, right? So just stuff like that. And I had a lot of fun. Again, the most fun I had in sales when I was in the growth space, mm-hmm. where it was called emerging businesses, mm-hmm. where Ericsson was trying to get in the utility business, and it was brand new. Like, they had only had $80 million in sales, mm-hmm. which is nothing at Ericsson. Working with the teams to try to get new business and grow it was really fun. And then after a couple years there, there's a whole bunch of organization changes. There was a bunch of politics, a whole bunch of people getting laid off. It's just, I'm not going to go through this inflection again. It's time for me to go, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I was also worried that I wouldn't be able to keep my extended severance package that mm-hmm. I had, because they were reducing those too. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to get out of there when I could get the money too, mm-hmm. so I could do my own thing. So I left. And then I did kind of interview. I was like, I'm going to go work at a small, cool company. And I went around and interviewed, and I'm like, no, I can't work at these. I didn't find a fit. I mean, it wasn't a good fit. I could have kept doing that, and I probably might have found a good fit at some point. But I just decided, no, I'm going to do my own company, because I have too many ideas, and I've done so many different things that I'm already, I either need to be on an executive team or I have my own company. Like, mm-hmm. I have to, and those roles are harder to find. I mean, it just takes longer and whatever. So I just started my own, and it's actually really cool to be able to just, these are our values. everything you want, you can do, right?
Yeah. So, so you founded your own company, and what is your title?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm the CEO of a alternative legal services provider company, and what we do is provide services that help bridge that gap that I experienced at Erickson with, the need for legal teams or people with legal expertise or even negotiation expertise. And, not necessarily all the teams are lawyers, but a lot of them have JDs or are lawyers, to bridge that gap and help the business areas more with the hands-on legal stuff, and not only bringing the legal expertise, but bringing project management to it as well, because companies need the projects to get done. And if the more proactive you are at being able to, see things through completion, that's also very important. So the company focuses on that.
How long have you been in that role? How long have you had the company?
3 years now.
Okay. And so, do you have a typical day? Could you describe like a typical day, or is it just different every day?
You can say it's probably different every day, but overall, on average, I spend maybe 50% of my time talking to people for new business, new leads, new people. It may be more than 50% of the time, but I'm out in groups. I belong to groups. I go to events. I talk to people, and then maybe the other 50% is, sitting down, writing things like proposals, managing your pipeline, those types of activities. So I'm basically in and out of my office or not in my office. I may be in Dallas or in Frisco or in Plano somewhere, meeting with somebody that may have leads or are a lead, and, talking to a lot of people. And the other thing is making sure that I have, my team set up at all times. So if I lose some contractors, not for any reason other than I can't necessarily give everybody enough work to sustain them.
Can you describe what your team is like? What's it made, and how many people make up your team right now?
Right. Okay. So right now there's 5 people on contract basis. And I have a general counsel. She's actually a part owner, so I can send her any of my legal needs and she'll take care of it. Then I have a senior project attorney. He kind of works on projects as they come, especially with our smaller businesses. He's not working full time yet because I don't have enough, but he's ready and waiting for us to start a project with a big company. So we're still waiting for that project to start, and what he'll do is go in for 30 days and do the assessment. So that way we can figure out how to manage it. So our team could end up being, after the assessment, depending on what the assessment results are, it could be, he's the lead, and then we maybe have 2 senior attorneys, maybe we have 2 junior attorneys, maybe we have some new grads. It depends on how much of what activities that is going to take, right? So the teams can actually be from anywhere from like 1 person to, we could do 20, 30 people if needed. Like if there was some big transactional sort of project that needed to be done, time sensitive or something like that, we could get a big team together.
Okay, so that's 3 of your team. Who are the other 2?
Yeah, so the other is I have a marketing manager that works part-time. So she basically, anything I throw at her, she does. But she helps me a lot with our trade shows and getting our marketing stuff together, and that's actually a big job in itself. And then I do have another attorney that is focused on our federal, state, environmental client that we're about to get. So that's the other one that I had just brought on recently.
So how did you find these people? How did you build your relationships with your team?
So either I get people referred to me, which happens sometimes, but otherwise I just put an ad on Indeed and I just find them myself. And I have a list of questions that I send to people, like, what are your strengths? Like just some questions to try to get to know their personality, because when I hire people, I don't necessarily hire for specific skills, but for intelligence and ability to kind of thrive in this sort of environment that we have. And, people that are excited about working at a startup, basically. And there's plenty of those people. There's many.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. So I haven't had any problem finding people. But I do have to make sure that they have the right fit with what we're doing. Yeah.
You're listening to The Law Lives Project with Anjie Viscianen. This episode is sponsored by Crescendo. Crescendo helps law students crush finals, the MPRE, and the bar. With hundreds of mnemonics and illustrations, thousands of official NCBE practice questions, affordable pricing, lifetime access, whiteboard videos, plus audio outlines and audio flashcards, Crescendo is revolutionizing legal education. Unlike some competitors who require expensive deposits, Crescendo offers the opposite, a 30-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. Most everyone sticks around. The 5-star reviews explain why you should try Crescendo. Matthew from Harvard said he wished he had Crescendo as a 1L. Kimberly from BYU said it's tricky business to concisely explain and teach such a vast amount of information, and Crescendo does so in an entertaining, easy-to-listen-to way. Ryan from ASU said he's convinced that Crescendo is the very best way to memorize black-letter law. Visit crescendo.com to learn more. That's CRUSHENDO.com. Now, back to the episode.
Can you describe generally what types of clients you mostly work for? Mm-hmm. It's B2B, right? So
yeah, it's all B2B. So we have our large clients, I would say Fortune 500 would be clients that are ideal for our flex teams. Mm-hmm. And those are the teams that are flexible with their needs. So it could be from 1 to 20 people.
Okay.
And then we have our small business program, which we basically help small businesses $0 to $50 million range. And we help them with all their corporate and business legal needs. And we're more cost effective than a law firm. And one of the reasons is because we have large projects. We can kind of subsidize, the cash flow. And we have low overhead. We don't have a fancy office. And many of my staff work from home, actually, if they want. They can have office space. But, I don't necessarily have the intent to have an office. I'd rather spend that money on, let's have a retreat in Florida or something and have a strategic retreat and spend all the money on that, and then people can work virtually or from home, and we can have people near our clients wherever they are, instead of having everyone has to come to the office from 9 to 5. I don't even think that's what people do anymore. I mean, I guess there's still companies trying to make people do that, but
law firms. 9 to 9.
Yeah.
Or 9 to midnight.
9 to midnight. Yeah. But yeah, that's not the intent. We can get a lot of things done without having people to have to drive, every day. And
so, how much of your time do you probably spend actually practicing law?
My time, I don't practice law in the traditional sense. I practice law in the sense that I know the issues well enough to get people to understand what we can offer them. So we're unique. I mean, I can't hire just a salesperson that doesn't really have a legal background, because it's really difficult to sell our consulting even. Mm-hmm. That's the extent of law I practice, quote unquote.
What are things that you think lawyers don't know about what you do?
I've had lawyers tell me that they don't know about contracts management. What is it? As a profession, right? Because it's more than just legal. I mean, many types of people can be a contracts manager. The legal part of it helps a great deal, because
could you break it down in layman's terms?
So a lot of what contracts manage is the part that people think about, the going back and forth and redlining and making sure the contract is negotiated to the standard and gets approvals, and any deviations from the standards are noted and that kind of stuff. And then there's all the other aspects of it, and every company's different, but of how far they go with it. But managing the contract, when do certain terms get triggered? Mm-hmm. When it's triggered, you need to communicate to the right people. I think one of the things that lawyers might overlook, and it's not that they don't understand, it's that if they're not in the environment of constantly trying to save a company money, or thinking about the money part of it, they might overlook the necessity to manage the contract. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because sometimes they write in a term that they don't realize the actual impact of that term.
I think that happens. I mean,
somebody has to actually make that happen and execute it.
Yeah, a contract manager has to be, it's the legal, a very valuable contract manager. They have legal, they have a business sense. They don't have to be good at finance or anything, but have a sense of what is a volume discount going to overall impact on a very large contract, right? And we have to make sure we get that volume discount. So and then there's the project management aspect of it, where you're actually making sure teams are doing the necessary things to make the contract work in a cost-effective way too. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm being really general because it's all over the board with all different types of contracts. And then there's the relationship with the third party and with the internal employees of the company. So like I said, the emotional intelligence and the relationship part is also important. And it's not that attorneys don't know that, but it might not be a central focus of their job all the time, because they want to make sure they get the terms right, and that's the great role for them. But when you step out into like a contracts management role, it becomes more than just terms and getting the legal stuff right.
Mm-hmm. So how many hours do you typically work a week?
Yeah, I don't really feel like I ever turn off, to be honest.
Yeah.
Even when I'm at the Arboretum. Most business
owners feel that way.
Yeah, I think even when I'm in the shower and even when I'm laying down at the Arboretum on a blanket, I'm thinking about something. And in fact, that's when the biggest ideas come. And then I write it down in my phone right then. So it's like I'm still working, but it's a different kind of work. Because when you own a business, it's all intertwined in your life. So it's hard to say when you actually are not working. Mm-hmm. Maybe when I'm sleeping, I'm not working.
So now in your current role, what type of organizations, professional organizations, do you belong to for your business?
Yeah, I belong to the Women's Business Council. I belong to the Association of Corporate Counsel. Mm-hmm. After belonging to a few different ones, you start to figure out which ones have the biggest return on your investment and which ones you can actually participate in. And I just picked the Women's Business Council and the attorney one, the in-house counsel association, because they give me the most information and the most leads, basically.
So what character traits does someone need to possess to excel in a position like yours?
Character traits. So I think a big one is flexibility. Mm-hmm. I want to say adaptability too, but flexibility. Another big one is communication. Big, and that's not just written, it's also verbal. Like, know when to pick up the phone versus send an email. Be effective in your communication by using various methods of communication. Texting's good too. I mean, when to text, when not to text. That's really important, I think. And when you say my position, I feel like, because I'm the CEO of the company, so building the relationships, bringing value to your customers outside of just your service. That being willing to do that is a big characteristic. I don't know if that's a characteristic, but it's important to be able to do that and be willing to go outside of thinking, okay, if we do this, we're going to make this money. If we do this, you got to kind of
just be money driven.
Yeah, no. You got to really be really open to just helping. People start to look at you and you start to get a reputation and you become the solution for people, then they're going to want to come to you. And it's more than just selling your service or explaining your service. It's more than just explaining the value of your service. It's, we don't just have this service, but, I can introduce you to this person. I can get this, I have an idea for you. And build the relationships in person, too.
So, did you even know that this whole area of law existed when you were a student? Did you know that?
I didn't. Not at all. No, it evolved, and I figured it out as I went. You kind of see the gaps in your company, so there's probably gaps in other companies, and there are, because we're getting hired by other companies. And there's even a gap with small businesses. They have a hard time finding a lawyer that they can afford to help them with a contract negotiation. It's really expensive for them to hire. And, we're not, I'm not going to say we're super dirt cheap or anything like that, but our clients work with senior level attorneys that have worked with all types of businesses for a very low rate. I mean, compared to
what they would pay in a law firm.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. So,
and alternative legal services, I mean, this is a growing slice of the industry, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I have some market information. So what happened was, the law firms are there. All the companies are hiring law firms for all the legal stuff a long time ago. I don't know the years, but that's how it started. Then the companies are like, wait, it's so expensive. Let's hire our own in-house lawyers and pay them a salary. Okay, so they started doing that, and then they create these legal departments. Then the legal departments are overwhelmed because everybody wants them. Everybody wants the legal people to help them with everything, right? And they still don't have enough.
They want them to be able to be a law firm, but they're not.
Yeah, exactly. And the in-house people are still hiring out to law firms. Yeah. Plus, they're not able to get everything done internally. Plus, they're a big drain on the overhead, actually. They're expensive to have, and they never get headcount approved, new ones. They ask for them all the time, but it's hard to get it approved because it's expensive, even though they're making a lot less than attorneys in law firms. So then, alternative legal services providers are popping up, right? Because, and it's not just me. I could name, there's several, actually, that have been around longer than me. They're doing really well. So,
do you know of any in different spaces than you that you can name?
Yeah. So there's like a company called Elevate Services. There's a company called, I think it's called InCloud. And it's all about, efficient administration, contracts management, legal support. Elevate Services has those flex teams like I do too. But I didn't know anything about them before I started mine in my own head, okay? And then I look on websites, I'm like, wow, there's a company
other people are doing this,
Wow. So I was surprised. But anyway, so yes, there's definitely other ones, and we are taking market share especially from law firms. Yeah, sure. And I can give a perfect example of that right now. I have a client who's working with his friend at the big law firm. I won't say which law firm it is. A big, huge law firm here in Dallas. And I mean, his friend is like partner and, the lawyer of all lawyers that has the big houses, the cars, all this stuff. And he's been working with him. Well, he met me, right? And I told him, I said, well, I can provide you, and I'm not trying to compete at all. I'm just saying we have hands-on attorneys that can help you on a day-to-day basis operationally, and here's our raise. Sure. And he's like, oh, wow, that's awesome. Because he's not going to ask his friend attorney to come into his company and work on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. That's just not how they work, right? But he needs help, right? And so he said, oh, okay. So I've been having serious discussions with him, and he's like, well, okay, I'm keeping you and this firm separate. Like, it's like he's worried about us.
Them finding out about you.
Yeah, something. So it's really kind of funny. So I am stealing some work, and what's going to happen and what's predicted is, the law firms are going to have to start buying firms like mine at some point. And even like you look at the consulting. But even the law
firms use alternative legal services providers for sure. Yeah. I mean, especially for e-discovery and some of these areas where the law firms just can't handle the load themselves. They do use a lot of ALSP.
Yeah, that's true. So, and then even the in-house are using us. Instead of going to law firm, they'll come to us too, because we have sort of like teams we can give them that work with their teams. Yeah. So it's a little bit different model, I guess.
Yeah. So do you have any advice, particularly for female law students? Can you share some of your experiences about what you thought it was like to be a female lawyer? And some of the challenges you might have faced.
Yeah, so one of the challenge was early on is I always felt like I needed to fit into some sort of mold. Like, I don't know, you have to be this way, you have to be more this way, you have to be this way, you have to be more like a man, don't smile so much, all these rules, quote unquote. And at I don't know, maybe in my early 40s, I was like, I'm so sick of all these stupid rules. And I just went full blown, I'm a woman, I'm going to be a woman, I'm not going to try to be anything else, I'm going to be respectful, but I'm not going to worry about the fact that, I may not be as aggressive or as assertive as the man sounds, and, I need to figure out how I can be most effective in my way, right? And as soon as I started doing that, number one, I felt better. Number two, I got more respect from everybody. Like, I'm walking around, I decided, okay, I want to wear a dress, a pink dress at Ericsson, among all these blue and black shirt, engineers.
Yep.
I'm going to do it. I don't care anymore. I'm just
white, gray, black,
I want to feel good. I want to look good. And no, it doesn't mean like I'm not going to do anything disrespectful, but to myself or anything. But it just, I decided one day, I'm a woman. I want to be a woman. I don't want to be a man. And there's got to be a way for me to express that and still be successful. I mean, why not, right? And I'm not the only one. I mean, you can see all kind of examples now of women just embracing their feminine side instead of trying to be like men, which is kind of like in the 80s. It was kind of like wear a suit. I remember I had like a suit, like a women's version of a man's suit, right? I mean, those pantsuit things.
Yeah.
I mean, all that kind of stuff, right? And it was just, and in your performance reviews, I was constantly being told, your hair is too long. You smile too much. I mean, I was literally told, you smile too much.
In a performance review?
In a performance review.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah. And I play with my hair. I mean, maybe I do, but I mean, it's kind of like, but who cares? Like, I don't know. It's just, it's so hard to be a woman and to be perfect. And what they're trying to do, I think, is mold you more into the corporate culture that's kind of male. It's the male things are what gets are seen as being effective. But you figure out you can be effective being feminine too. You just have to block out all this stuff and just go talk to people, build the relationships. Because I mean, if you want to stereotype, women are good at building relationships, and I can go talk to people and get them to trust me really quick.
Sure.
Maybe faster than a man could, and at least I can get allies and get people to support me. And then once you have this people that are helping you, then you can do anything. I mean, influential people help you and they trust you,
So at what point in your career did you have children?
I was late. I was 37 when I had my first one, and she's 12 now.
And were you still at Ericsson?
I have a 3-year-old too now.
Were you still at Ericsson?
I was.
Okay.
I was at Ericsson when I was pregnant first and had the baby while I was working full time.
So what are your struggles of juggling children?
Oh, that was hard. Okay. I mean, I look back on it now and I just amazed at the ability to be able to have a baby, stay home for 6 weeks, take him to daycare every day at 8 in the morning, go to work, go pick him up at 5 or 6 or whatever, and come home. I mean, it's just like, really? Like, because now that I have my own business, I have a 3-year-old, the experience with him is much different. I mean, he can stay home. I can take him to daycare at 10. I can work from 8 to 10 in the morning. Maybe he's sleeping or eating or whatever. And then I can take him to school, and then I can pick him up at 4, and I can do, I mean, it's so much more flexible, and it's a totally different experience with the family, right? But I will, the corporate world, I don't think is really set up to allow a parent, and oftentimes it falls on the woman most of the time, but it's not really set up for people to be effective parents. I mean, just in general, right? It's not. I mean, law firm's probably the same thing. So law firm's probably worse, actually, because at least you have vacation.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. So it's really hard to keep up your momentum and the same level of ambition that you had before you had a kid. And that may not. Everyone's experience is different, but for me, there's no way. I wasn't going to stay in the office till 8, 6, 7 anymore. I mean, I just left. And then you see all these people that don't have kids or have another parent taking care of the kids, or they're not worried about it. They're the ones excelling because they're spending the time on the stuff. So, you kind of feel like you get held back a little bit, I guess, when you have kids. And if you don't, and some of the women I've seen, they still maintain that ambition, but they give up a lot. I mean, their kids are home with nannies. They're still very much owned by the company in those higher levels, right? So it's just, and some of these examples you see people on TV. I don't know, the executive brings their kids to the office, and I don't know. It's, what are they doing at the office all day? I mean, it's like, it's really hard to just balance all this stuff. I think as a culture, it would be nice if we gave more value to, just family and, work. And I don't know, I think it's changing a little bit, especially, I guess, the millennial generation
for
is
sure.
like, I want to have quality of life. I don't care so much about my salary, right? That's what I read about them. So that'll change it, right?
Yeah.
That's good. Because it's really stressful, and I don't think people shouldn't have to be so stressed out. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, why? Because we need to get this contract, and everyone in the company has to work on it 24/7.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. That's it for today. Thank you to our guest speaker, and thank you to all of you for listening to another episode of the Law Lives Project. If you're a prospective law student that's interested in speaking with attorneys one-on-one, check out leguplegal.com. Leg Up Legal is an online mentoring platform that connects prospective law students with attorney mentors. Sign up for a membership today to learn more about the practice of law and see if it's a good fit for you. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate it if you left a review on iTunes or any other platform that you're listening on. If you have any questions or comments about anything you heard on the podcast, or if you have ideas for guest speakers, please contact me by emailing me and my team at info@leguplegal.com. Thanks again, and don't forget to tune in next week.